Hey everyone, and welcome to season 2 of an operator's blog. This season is going to be all about AI. And what I'm trying to do in this season is to really report back what is happening on the ground in the Valley AI ecosystem. This episode is going to be all about AI-Infra, and super excited to have Arko, co-founder and CEO of Pipeshift, with me today. Pipeshift is a VC-backed company. It is building reliable and SLA-compliant inference-as-a-service for real-time AI applications in production. I have seen Arko's journey for the last couple of years. The founder started off hacking software as undergrad students a few years back. From there to now, moving to the US, doing VC, and really today building best-in-class AI infrastructure. I think there's a lot to unpack and a lot to learn from Arko's experience. And so Arko, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm Hamza. It's been a long time that I know you. I think it was before we started Pipeshift. That's when I first met you. Great catching up in a more formal setup like this.
Great. And I'll make sure that I get all that's going in your brain out into the pod for our listeners, and especially cross-border AI founders. So cool.
For sure.
Let's get right down to it. And I want to immediately go into the brass tacks, right? So looking at the ecosystem, and more as an investor, right? You're seeing people building agents, people building co-pilots. You have dev tools. You have all kinds of kind of legacy applications being built out. And of course, through building Pipeshift, even kind of seeing your own customers, seeing the YC ecosystem in general, what parts of the AI ecosystem do you feel are kind of today overhyped, in terms of when you tie it back to the actual customer value being delivered? And then what parts do you think are actually overlooked, right? Where more people are kind of not talking about it?
I think I want to say overhyped. I think it's getting more attention than it should with everything else that I have seen. So because we work with so many AI companies, I think at core, I tend to see use cases and interesting pieces of work that people do com compared to what's just available on Twitter. So I think it's less about overhyped. I think AI is to a certain extent very early even now. It's like probably first or second year of like a 10-15 year journey even now from here. I think I would say less looked at in sides would be the boring work that people do. There are a lot of boring use cases where there's actual business value, and you'll be surprised on how easy it is to get customer delight over there. But I do see many engineers, probably because they understand it, just going after coding use cases. And that's like a heavy competition. Like every now and then there's a new way of helping developers code or developer productivity. Everybody wants to go down the cursor and windsurf route or lovable, emergent kind of a vibe coding route. But then it is heavily competitive, and you will be surprised when we just see use cases where if a customer is able to handle things like OCR and basic customer verification for insurance companies, they're actually making a lot more uh, end-to-end ROI for these businesses, and they're actually getting paid the bucks for it. So I think that's what's underappreciated, and I think it's also a nature of Twitter. It hypes what is available in the market for developers. Uh, but actually, the real B2B businesses, people who don't have like the best, fanciest websites, are probably the ones that are actually having some sticky business that is sustainable to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, totally hear you. I have a major thesis on kind of AI going into specific domains and kind of going into verticals. I think the challenge there is the customers still need to be educated, right? I mean, there is kind of now a propensity to adopt AI, but the sales cycles are longer. You have to kind of work harder in a way compared to dev tools and kind of the
Yeah.
PLG motion products, which just tend to spread fast.
Hmm. I agree. I agree. I mean, in a way that what we're also seeing is there's a new age of founders who are actually operators becoming AI founders who are not, I mean, the first set of AI companies were people from AI, ML, techies, like engineers coming and building things out. Now we are seeing a lot of say, sales leaders coming and building something in AI. They find a engineer, they work together as a CEO and a CTO and just start building a company. I think that's where, like, as a company, we also benefit a lot because we tend to, when we are in managed infrastructure, you kind of tend to work with companies who are heavily focused on product engineering and don't want to spend resources or time figuring things out on the earliest stages on infrastructure, which I feel as a early adopter 2 years back, an engineer-led company would want to. We also did that. That's how we landed on infrastructure. We were building applications. We started dabbling in infrastructure. We ended up becoming an infrastructure company. So I think I do agree with that, and I think that that thesis that you're having is also playing out in the kind of founders that are now starting companies. I think it took them a year or so to just understand how AI works, what's the value, play around with ChatGPT to even see what these LLMs can do for their workflow, and then productize that.
Yeah, and that's why I think this whole narrative of, whatever SaaS is dead and all that, to me, I look at software as essentially solving business problems. And, I started my career in venture when it was software products, right? And as cloud kind of came in and then it became SaaS. And now with AI, I think the underlying technologies are just more powerful. We have more and more intelligence and the architectures are looking different. So to me, it is an extension and to me, it is a continuum, frankly.
Of course. I mean, at the end of the day, software is, and it's not like ChatGPT is not a software. It is a software. It's not any different. It's just the underlying technology is different. It's not just running on cloud. It has a really powerful model that's running on top of cloud. So I agree with that. I think it's just SaaS is dead is more like SaaS has evolved into something completely different. That's largely how you should look at. And I mean, I don't know how much of the world GDP is currently in salaries. Um, I had one founder who told me once, he was like, people just underestimate TAM. Should see how much of global GDP is in payroll. And that's the kind of TAM that software can solve for because it's actually pitting it against human hours. And so humans can actually focus on something more meaningful in their businesses and evolve to something else. You're not sitting and doing bookkeeping today because your software is doing that. I think that's how it is.
Yeah, totally. I think the TAMs are kind of infinitely larger, and I think to me, what is interesting is as with any platform shift, then it just gives rise to more startup opportunities because incumbents, by definition, kind of tend to struggle, at least in the past, right? Although this time it's interesting.
They're building fast. They're building too
They're
fast.
building fast, and so this time it's an interesting landscape. But we'll come back to that. Going back to your own backstory, walk us through the journey. I mean, your journey as a founder as well, and kind of Pipeshift's journey, and especially I think from a cross-border lens. I think a lot of the audience is kind of US India cross-border AI founders. Walk us through how kind of you have navigated the shift of kind of moving from India to the Valley, and then of course the last 1 year with YC and post YC.
I mean, I don't know if I followed any playbook or anything. Like I know there's a lot about playbooks and how you should move, how should you make the move and stuff around that. But then we were just building in Bangalore, spent a year and a half figuring out what we want to build. Eventually realized that the maturity of the ecosystem is much higher in the Bay. And when we were building infrastructure, most companies in India were probably figuring out if the use case even works. Then the appetite to pay and all of those things, like I can double down on that also. We've seen a major shift in the kind of conversations we have with customers. Having said that, I think how we looked at it is that we have one shot at it. We were in Bangalore. We were like, it's not working out. There's no point being here. YC talks about increasing the surface area of success. It's like you can be like luck plays a huge role in companies, but then you can also engineer luck by just being closer to where people can get lucky. So we had some runway from early, very small round that we had done, and then we were like, uh, there's no point spending 20 months on slow burn and not doing anything and dying out. Just take all of it and just move to the Bay Area. So I just came here on a one-way ticket, trying to just understand what's working, what's not working. Because I'm like, if you have to learn it, you can't learn it on Twitter. You have to just be here and meet people and see what's happening. Because the vibe or the energy is very different of how people are building what they're looking to build. The ambitions are 10 times higher, 100 times higher. So when I came, I think, and again, when I came, didn't have any friends who were working in big tech. I was just out of college. So most of my friends were either working in India or planning a master's here. So there was no connections I had. So when I came here, I was just looking at Luma and I was just looking at all the events that are happening and being like, can I just create some kind of a network here? I had met a bunch of people in Bangalore, so like a handful of people that I came and started meeting here. They made some intros forward of just interesting people you want to meet. There was no agenda, just meet interesting people to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And then went to events, realized that most of them are a waste of time. But then after 10 events, you just know that which are the two kind of events that you should go to. So just started doubling down on it once or twice a week. That's how I ended up meeting one of my first angel investors. In an instant, he kind of was like, I like what you're doing. I understand what you're doing. And then he was like, why don't you apply in YC? And I was like, we have been rejected 4 times already. And he was like, let me see if I can in any way help you speak to the partners. So that happened. And in 5 days, I was in YC. That's where that whole engineer luck happens. Like, I didn't know this person. I just bumped into him. The other thing is the Bay Area is not a zero-sum mindset. I think they just want to help each other. I've seen competitors sitting and helping each other figure out GTMs because there's infinite markets to build in. Uh, and I think people are just very helpful. Like, and then now I help some of these people that some early stage founders who come and they're like, where should I stay? Who should I meet? Which kind of event should I go to? So I think it's just they keep giving forward, and I think that just is what has made Bay Area what it is today. And then after YC, I think we just kept building from there. The standard YC 3 month grind, build, ship, sell. That's all. Demo day, raised a quick demo day round, and then have been building and trying to get to PMF since then. So it's roughly been 15, 16 months of actively building out Pipeshift. And then, yeah, the other thing is, uh, I might be a bit opinionated in it, but I don't believe that doing quarterly trips makes sense in today's world. If you have to move, just move. And being cross-border co-founders also becomes a problem. So move your co-founders as well, because if you have tech co-founders or technical founders, they'll learn the most of the best practices in AI just being here. So all three of us have moved. Like traditionally, usually one person moves or does quarterly trips. We have just all moved. We're like, we have to build it as a global company from day one. It is not going to be like a company built in US, build in like you cannot build in rupees and sell in dollars. The talent pool is like in a way that you might have to just pay in euros, dollars, rupees at the same time and then just hire the best talent.
Yeah, no, totally. Thank you so much for saying that. I think all of us have now made enough noise about this particular thing in the ecosystem. So I'm seeing at least now compared to even 4, 5 years back, more founders realizing that the if you are really serious about building a startup in the US and especially now with AI, you got to move here, and there's no shuttling and all that is not going to work. Also, I think love that story around your angel. I think that's a classic Bay Area story of paid forward, and which actually surprisingly, I mean, I've been kind of here for now what 12, 13 years, and now it is second nature to all of us, anyone who has been here for a long time. But it is still not that appreciated in ecosystems outside the Bay Area. I think people don't understand that nobody gets underestimated here. So you can get in front of people really fast.
Yeah, I mean, in our batch, I think one great thing of that happened in YC for us, it's not the fact that we got into YC, of course, that helps. It does uh, help you in the earlier stages to create some amount of credibility. I think what we derived from YC is just ambition. The cohort in which you were there, you have PhD scientists from MIT, you have people building data centers in space, people building data centers in ocean, and when you speak to them, these are like 20, 22-year-old people who have dropped out of college and they're like, we'll build a data center. I don't know anything about networking, but I'll build it out. And they're getting funded just sheerly on ambition. Like there's infinite capital, so there's infinite scale that you can hit. Uh, there is no limitation of how much you can grow and how much you can raise, how much you can make in terms of the ecosystem. I think that's the biggest shift. So when we came, I think in those 3 months, where we wanted to be with Pipeshift versus where we were in terms of the vision that we had with Pipeshift, it just kept growing bigger and bigger. And now that I have spent a considerable amount of time here, and the kind of people I have met, these are people who are CXOs at companies like Databricks, Nutanix. You are seeing data infrastructure companies building empires here. You barely see them when you're in Bangalore. Like most that you see, again, not taking away the credibility or the work that they have done, but like you see e-commerce companies. So as a data infra company or a infrastructure company, I don't have people to look up to. So when I go and look at these companies, you're just driving down the interstate and you're seeing a huge pure storage office. You're seeing Databricks office for events. You're going there and you're seeing the kind of scale that they've achieved. And that also rubs on you as a founder. You're like, this is what you can build. It's not just a company or a dev tool that you have to go ahead and struggle in scaling, compete with, and then compete for capital and all of that. Like the mindset changes. Uh, I think that's the biggest thing that has shifted. And every founder I meet who has moved from anywhere in the world says the same thing. Is the mindset just changes if you actually stay here for long enough.
To more of the 0 to 1 side, right? And then the problem statement identification. In fact, I just recently posted on LinkedIn, right, that I'm seeing this tendency within AI founders to pick very low hanging fruit kind of problem statements, right? I mean, there is a tendency to kind of quick fast follow, put something out there. They're very like quote unquote cool use cases. They spread virality around it, right? At Pipeshift, what was the journey of identifying and stress testing the problem statement and kind of getting that comfort that, hey, this is kind of not a nice to have. This is a critical application. This should exist as a business, as a company.
I think again, we did not go down that route. We are still not in general access. So I think uh, we picked one of the hardest problems to solve in AI, which was just inference at core. So keeping that in mind, I think we took the flip side, and it was, I think, just playing to the strengths. For some founders, marketing is strength, creating hype is strength. Maybe product engineering might not be the core strength of the team. We understood that where does the team excel? You just, and then we are like, we excel at engineering, so why not just double down on that? Then Michael from YC says this. He's like, if you're already playing the toughest game in the world, so rather play a game that you're good at. So if we, for example, went down a B2B SaaS route, building sales co-pilots, uh, coming out of hardware experience in robotics and then AI ML experience all through college, data science experience from training models, and even if it's traditional models, for me to go and compete with, say, sales copilot company built by somebody who has led and managed 50, 100 people sales orgs within companies. It's very different at that point. The way they would think about the workflows versus how I would have to learn and figure out the workflows is very different. So I think just playing to the strengths helps. So I know there is a large sum of companies who want to do something really quick and create the noise, create the hype, which works. I mean, Cluely is a great example. Cluely just blew apart the marketing tactics that most companies had. But at the same time, I feel like they're also playing to their strengths. And if you are not playing to your strengths, it's not sustainable on the long term. It'll run out. The fuel will run out very, very soon. So I think it's more about playing to your strengths. And I think we went down that route. We were building applications and we were like, we just looked at what the engineering team likes to do, what we like to do. And I think most of the time, subconsciously, we were spending time reading on how can we make we were building an enterprise search tool like Glean. How can we make our search faster? How can we make our search more accurate? How can we create the searches on-prem on VPCs for customers? How can we maybe break down the search queries in different domains, sales, marketing, HR, and then run custom models behind it? So I think it was less about thinking what's the next search experience going to look like what a Perplexity has done, or what uh, now Glean is doing. Rather than that, we spent more time thinking how can we make this search efficient, faster, more scalable, which was infra. And I think those cues we picked up really quick, and then we were like, probably that's what we like to do. And sure enough, we wanted to pivot, and then we are now just doubling down on that, and that's probably working much better for us than anything that we have built in the past.
Yeah, and I mean, I've at least written 5 blog posts on right to win, differentiation, how do you found a market fit, being intellectually honest about all of that. And this to me is just becoming so important. I still see a lot of founders not appreciating it to that point. And I think there needs to be enough talk. I think, I mean, that's great. I mean, you cited the YC partner example, right? I think in kind of those ecosystems, I think those learnings have been there, right? Where, yeah, you are already playing the hardest game. So why to play the hardest game on hard mode,
Yeah,
right?
like play something that you're good at, and they fundamentally believe everybody has some one thing that they're good at.
Yeah,
um, and then like you can be the best driver, and you can create like the best like say agency for driver, like freelance drivers or whatever it might be, or you can just double down on it and become the best F1 driver, racer, whatever you want to be. So you always have like one thing that you're good at, just double down on that. Otherwise, it's already hard. Like it's hard enough. Why do you want to make it harder?
totally. And this is, I think, a great. I think this was kind of more inside out, right? Which is, hey, what is it that we are very good at as a team? Now, if you look at outside in from a market perspective, right? I mean, you have, of course, the AI native companies, you have the hyperscalers, you have the incumbents. Like everyone seems to be stepping on each other's toes, right? And it seems like every week, I was saying every month, but I'm like every week, somebody seems to be going into some other company's space. And I know you guys are at C stage, right? So you are kind of still figuring out the
Yeah.
BMF part and all that. But how are you thinking even at this stage about differentiation, right? Like what is it in the product that should give you the edge in the market as all these big companies and small companies are getting into your space as well?
We can probably spend a couple of minutes talking about Pipeshift and what we solve for.
Yeah,
Because I think we have spent almost a year figuring out what is the differentiated problem that we can solve for. Um, and I think that one thing is like probably we are young and naive enough to take contrarian bets early on. Uh, I was listening to Vijay from Atomic Work once, and he was also talking about like how as you get more experience, your risk of taking ability of taking a contrarian bet, not taking a big bet on something known, but like taking a contrarian bet becomes lower. But I think probably that it's our naivety. We started with something 6 months back. Things were not working that well for 6 months because then we were competing with Together AI, Fireworks, people who have built out the ground up developer adoption, gone gone into the lowest hanging fruits and have built PLG from ground up. Um, that competition with 50, 60 times lower capital is really hard to play when they have been playing it for like three, four, like a couple of years longer than you. So we were like, what's the best use of our capital? Let's find the right niche of customers that we can work with and find that narrow wedge that we can enter the market with, but solve for a pain that nobody else is looking at. Coming down to what we have realized is today, if you're building any real-time application, and this is learnings over like a year of just grinding. We built like 2 lines of businesses, scaled to 130, 150 uh, kind of run rates across them almost every quarter, months. But then we had to like shut those down, scale things back again from zero, because we're like this GTM is not working. So I think two things that helped us a lot. One is not shying away from saying no or firing a customer if you feel like that's not going to be the right place that you need to be because your capital is going to burn just if you keep doing that and you know that it's not going to work out. So remove the baggage as soon as possible so you can move fast. And the second thing I think that we realized is just speak to as many people as you can and don't look at what's hyping on Twitter. Just meet someone and understand what's their problem. And I think asking the right questions, it's again first principles, basics. but I think people still don't know how to ask the right questions. I also didn't know. I learned over a year. So now my question pretty much is, as a engineering leader, what's top of your mind? What's bothering you? What's keeping you awake? Just give them a free flow to talk about the problems. Then you will pretty much hear where you can fit in. I think that's what gave us the cue, which is today, if you're building any real-time application, be it a chatbot, voice bot, or a voice agent, these can be computer use agents, whatever, anything that has real-time use cases. The problem with customers today is they're all built and scaled on top of serverless infrastructure, which is APIs, token-based APIs. Uh, that does not work when it comes to production scale and SLAs. A very strong belief that we have is today your SLAs or your performance outcomes and everything is defined by the API provider that you have. Rather, in production, as a product team, once you have hit PMF on that use case, discovery phase is behind. Once you have hit PMF on that use case, your SLAs need to be defined by you. It's about what you want to get to over the next 6 months to a year and what you want to offer to your customer. And then your infrastructure needs to be reinforced according to that. And it's simple when you think about it, but then most companies that we spoke to were just like, we'll just stick to the best model. And when we were talking to them, we kind of realized that it's probably a notion that they have not doubled down on. Because when we spoke to, say, a unicorn company's CTO, they're like, I just believe that the models are going to keep getting better, so I would rather build on closed source models. And then my next question was that what are you going to do with a deep research model when you're supporting customer support voice agents for your e-commerce customers? And he had no answer. He's like, that's right. And then we went into like an hour of conversation on how he can just use a smaller custom trained model and actually deliver better latencies, better experiences, better scale to his customers rather than just sitting relying on one mod. It's a stable use case. So that's these are the things that we started doing, like open-ended questions and giving them a cue to actually go into the thought, thought thoughts that we want them to. And then the second thing that we started realizing if is, for example, voice agents. Today, you would use a deepgram for transcription. You would have a LLM on on your Bedrock or Vertex AI, something like that. You would have an 11 labs for TTS. All of this end-to-end chaining would happen across at least three different regions of service. Um, so as a voice company, you are trying to chain together three APIs from different servers, different locations, different data centers, which all add network latencies across each API call. And we were like, if you're in production, what you'd rather need is having your own self-hosted Kubernetes cluster on which you can have a STT model, like let's say Whisper, a TTS model, and an LLM all together in the same cluster, in the same data center or region. So the end-to-end API call is like probably 5 times faster. And then replicating that across Kubernetes clusters in different clouds wherever there is availability. So you can be on AWS in US West, you can be on Azure in US East, you can be on Nebius in Europe, you can be on Yota or NISA in India, and be on uh, GCP on in Southeast Asia. So like 5 regions, just replicate the same deployment and then creating a routing logic that allows you to get to the right region for the exact SLA that you want from a latency perspective. And these are problems that most people or developers who are building on Twitter, hacking on Twitter, they don't know about because these are production problems less talked about. These are hair on fire problems for engineers that they are trying to solve as engineering managers because they don't find dev tools that are actually doing these things. So I think that's largely where we come in from. We're like, we'll help you with managed distributed inference that's SLA compliant, uh, built for real-time use cases. So you can deliver SLAs that you want to. And I think that's our contrarian belief, which is that companies don't want a dev tool in production. They want outcome-based APIs because that's what OpenAI and Anthropic provide them. So just ask them what's the SLA that they want, what's the performance they want, and make sure they have an API that just works. That's more than enough for them. They do not want a dev tool or CLI or SDK where they can deploy 100 models. That's an experimentation problem. Let the other companies solve that. We'll solve the production problems. And we'll sell outcomes rather than selling a dev tool or an SDK.
Yeah, Very interesting what you said. I think kind of couple of implicit points in that, right? And would love to get your thoughts on that. I think one, it seems like I see this tendency, especially in the dev tool space, and when founders are technical, that they tend to focus on their problem statements in their universe. And the fact of the matter is that there is a whole universe out there which has very different problems and who are actually paying customers. So that's one, which is I think there is a lot to be said about. Yeah, you can start off with your strengths, but you have to first index on what are the problem statements that the potential ICPs are facing. That's one. And then second is it sounds like, especially in the enterprise space, as you start peeling the onion, there are still a lot of these crevices which are still uncovered by the large companies or by kind of existing even scaled AI native companies.
Hmm. I think it's also the incentive structure. Like, an AWS does not have an incentive to solve for this at core. They would rather work with a standalone partner or something that does this for their customers. And the other thing is, when you actually start dealing with SLAs and real-time reliability, a single cloud vendor also doesn't solve for the problem, because you'll always have availability issues. So you have to go multi-cloud, you have to maintain latencies, maintain availability, maintain scalability. You have to go multi-cloud. So you'll have to have an agnostic player that comes in and does a large part of the heavy lifting on infrastructure. And by default, most product engineering teams don't understand how they can actually deploy models, scale models. Max, they can do a couple of GPUs of LLMs. But when you're scaling, a couple of GPUs are not enough. You have to probably create and scale across nodes and interconnects. And that's where the problem starts happening. Again, I keep going back to people, that other people's thoughts, but I think it's a great way of articulating how Arvind Srinivas from Perplexity mentioned it. It's like, if they say it can be built in weekends, or if it can build quick, they have never built anything for production. So I think it's literally that problem, which is like, okay, as a developer, you can run things on a single GPU. What happens when you're running two models at a concurrency of 100 requests per second across three regions? That's the problem that you need to look at as a company to solve for. And that's where the real value is.
Coming on how especially with Pipeshift, like how you guys are building product, right? And I want to get a little tactical here, right? So I think as kind of models are evolving fast, new capabilities are coming out into the market at more of the foundation level. What are some of the things that you and the team are very tactically doing to stay on top of these developments, so that of course, you can figure out how to incorporate them, and B, there's always going to be a classic tussle, right, between something new comes out which can enable a lot of new features for you,
Yeah.
but you've hit on something which seems to be working, and so you can kind of make that better, right? So there is this whole even FOMO on the product dev side, right? That, hey, do we push out one more new feature? Do we run one more new experiment? And even if something new is coming out, do we incorporate it, or we should not care about it? It's fine. Like, we are kind of going down on a path. So talk to me very like operationally, how you guys dealing with this challenge as a team?
I think we are not too, we don't get too forward by, say, a new launch that comes from OpenAI or something like that. Because I think internally the mindset that we have is, if a company is in discovery phase and they are figuring out their use cases, or they want to just figure out which model works for them, that's not the ideal customer that we should go after as a company, because that's not our ICP. Our ICP would be a company. I mean, even if I just break down the market of open source models, closed source models, we believe closed source models are the best when you're figuring out the use case discovery phase. They're the best models, so you have the least amount of effort required to make them work for a use case and get it up and running and make sure it's validated. Once it's validated, open source brings in reliability and scalability, like predictable scalability and predictable cost structures. And it brings in reliability from multiple aspects. One is, you can actually push performances up, maintain SLAs. It's not shared deployment, so you can actually manage your deployments and memory allocations for different models. The second thing is, you're not dependent on other people's release cycles. Like, there are so many companies recently that we've spoken to that are just mentioning that once Anthropic released Claude 4, their feature flags on the features that they had deployed with Claude 3.7 went up by 10-20% because the quality suddenly degraded for 3.7. And that's not okay if you have a stable, reliable use case that's working for you. So when your team is focusing on the next use case or the next feature, you're going back and reinforcing the previous features with a new release and new model. When all you need is just an API that works and does not suddenly change, unless you want it to change, where you're like, no, I want to now push this use case, have a new additional feature on this use case. So I think that's where we see open source coming, where you need reliability and you need predictable cost structure, because I think we've seen enough companies on Anthropic and OpenAI or Gemini who are on a $3,000 per month spend, and very soon in 2 months they're on $10,000, and in 6 months they're on $50,000 a month. And that's really problematic because as you're scaling, your cost structures start bloating out to a point where you now become heavily dependent on one model and one company, and all your spends are going into it. Your burn shoots up. I mean, I've met companies who have $1 million Anthropic spends per month. So that's where open source comes in. It gives you some sanity around, this is the amount of scale I can hit with these many, say, X $1,000, and how it's going to scale. So I think we have been very tactical on the kind of companies we want to work after. So tomorrow, if a new open source model comes out, we are not the first ones that will bring in support for it, because our customers can try that model out on any shared endpoint provider out there in the world. What we deliver to them is, okay, you know, this model GPT OSS works for you, or this Kimi K2 works for you, or Quen works for you. You tell us the SLAs and we'll set up that infrastructure for you and give you the API that just works. And so I think the proposition is very well defined. And and finally, the other thing that I've heard a bunch of dev tool founders that have actually scaled up, succeeded, talk about is be a bit opinionated. Be a bit opinionated on what you will do and you will not do as a founder. And that allows you to actually stick to what you should be going after. Because in infrastructure, it takes time to build out. And you need to just not have the FOMO of just wanting to do something else very quickly, because you have to build on an opinion that you create of, this is how the world needs to be. Because if the other person knew how the world should be, they would have built it. So you need to have that opinion. Also, don't have blinders on, listen to advice, but also have some amount of opinion on how the world needs to be, what you believe is an infrastructure problem that should be solved for and should not be solved for. Like 2 years back, we knew that evals is not something that should be solved for by a company. And today, almost every company that's in production has their own evals pipeline. They don't use any other tool. Like evals is something that's in-house. And we knew this 2 years back. We were like, it has to be custom built. Same thing as data preparation. We don't think data set preparation is something for training, is something that needs to be outsourced. Every company will own it in-house. And I think that's probably coming from the traditional ML world that we come from, where we know that data is core to you. It's garbage in, garbage out. Data is something that you'll keep in-house. Evals are core to you. You'll keep that in-house. And every company that's in production is now evolving into that workflow. We knew this 2 years back. That's the reason we never built evals on our platform.
And in terms of, as an infra company, when you're having some of these conversations with customers, how, because I think customers also are learning now, right? And in a way, you're also being, while you're looking to solve that problem, I'm assuming they're also looking at you as a thought partner in kind of unraveling some of these problem statements and seeing what is the right approach to a lot of this
Yep.
stuff, right?
Yep.
What are you seeing there?
They are looking at us as the experts coming in. And that's I think also ties into what I was talking about on the opinionated part. If they are looking at you for answers, you should not go and give them a free hand on which model do you want to use, what kind of orchestration are you planning to use for this specific use case. Tell me the use case, and I'll probably recommend what you ideally should go after. And then we have the infra to support that for you. And I think that's the easiest way to build and actually maintain that place with customers. Because the customer is coming to you for help. They don't want to go ahead and figure out like they don't want to go ahead and test 50 different models. Just give them a small set, like 2, 3 models that ask them the use case. Give them a set of 2, 3 models that work. They'll figure that out and then they'll tell you which model works. There are customers who want, like, a great example would be this customer who wanted to use a vision model. They wanted to use a vision model for their use case because they had some vision pipelines, which was just 10% of their end API calls. Inference on vision models is actually much slower than text models if you have to reinforce it for vision pipelines. And we had like because of how our infra is set up, we have really custom pipelines that can optimize on text inference and custom pipelines that can optimize on vision inference. We were like, why are you using the same model? Anyway, the model becomes bigger. Both use cases take a hit on performance. Why not separate them out into two different models? Have a smaller GPU instance for the vision use case because the use case is smaller, and have a bigger instance for the text model. Both models can be individually smaller. And that in itself is actually what the production stack looks like at the moment. But when they came, they were like, can we use this large vision model because that's the only one that's working for all our use cases? So you have to probably be a bit opinionated and be like, I mean, again, not I don't know what's the easy way of placing it, but like you just believe that you are the expert and you know how it should be architected. If they knew how to, they would have architected it already. So just bring in those insights because 6 months later, if something fails for them, it doesn't work out for them, you are the one that's taking the business hit. Um, so I think that's how we're looking at it.
And as a small team, as a seed stage company, like how do you stay on top of the model ecosystem itself, right? With closed source, open source, and so many new things happening, because then you have to be the ones who have to be going to the customers and they're looking up to you in terms of, hey, you are the expert on this.
I think that's just dedicating some time every day just to understand which are the best, highest used models by developers on anywhere, open router, um, artificial analysis, seeing what kind of models are actually being used, talking to some of the other infra companies also, that what are you seeing with your customers, talking and then being close to also your existing product engineering teams. Almost in every product engineering team, you have one or two engineers who want to try out the next model that comes out. It's just a thing that they want to do. So just if you be on top of it, you can definitely get a sense of it. I don't think there's a playbook or a tool that allows you to like create a feed of information every morning that you can look at, like a dashboard. But it's more like just consume information as much as you can because the bet is everybody else is a human. Humans are not very different. So the information that you are able to consume by being in infrastructure and being somebody that's interested in the space is probably anyway 10 times more than what somebody else that's not in this space is consuming. So you anyway have more information on that space than anybody else. So we're not over optimizing for it, but I feel like that knowledge also distills out in a week or so. You understand, like you can be a week behind. It's not a big problem on 10% of the model releases or information that's somebody else has. You might have something that other people don't have. So I think it's around. It's mainly like that.
Yep. And coming to those, I think the customer conversations, of course, right now there's massive pull that we are seeing. Um, but in actual conversations, what are some of the apprehensions that you are hearing from customers in terms of adopting AI and, of course, in your context, more on the infra layer, around hallucinations, reliability, privacy? What are some of those questions that are the tough questions that are being asked?
I think the bigger question that they ask us is why should I, again, because we only deal with open source models, why should I use open source models when OpenAI is releasing GPT-5, Anthropic is going to release the next model, Gemini is doing so well on their side. And I think there's some amount of education required where, again, these people might just be have a dogmatic mindset maybe for like a year, they might have had a dogmatic mindset thinking that I will, as a company, only bet on closed source and build on closed source because the models will keep getting better. But then you have to then change the reference frame and be like, it's not closed versus open. It's about where open source shines, which is your stable use cases. Your stable use cases are not getting better just because OpenAI is releasing a new deep research model, or Claude is releasing or Anthropic is releasing a new Claude model that can create database schemas from scratch and is the best coding model out there. Your customer support bot is not changing, or your transcription pipelines are not changing because there's a new text to speech model that Gemini has released. Your transcription pipeline still messes up on Indian accent, or still messes up on European accents, or is messing up on catching the SSN numbers when you are building insurance agents. those are the things you should solve for rather than being dogmatic of closed versus open. Look at the problem and then figure out the infra. Same thing. Look at the SLA, then figure out the API. Look at the problem, then figure out the model and orchestration behind it, rather than saying that I I as a company will only do what I'm getting offered by this specific model on this specific API. Because I'm an Azure partner, I'm on AWS, whatever it might be. So I think that education takes time. Of course, in many cases we fail. It doesn't go to a second call also because we just realize that they are just too hung up on it. In those scenarios, we just know that 6 months later they'll anyway face the problem and come back. Um, and in the areas where they're a bit more open to talk about it, I think it's some amount of education, brainstorming on how they can orchestrate it. Truly, because it's not their fault. If they don't spend 100 hours a week or 150 hours a week just figuring out infra day in, day out. They have their problems to solve. So you have to come in with that insight and probably help them out. And that's what we are putting out. Like there's that empathy for that customer also. Plus, we also have that opinionated nature where we know that whatever they're saying, take it with a pinch of salt because they're not spending as much time on infra. They might want something, but is it actually what they want? It's the same Henry Ford thing. They might want faster horses when you can give them cars. Why not give them cars?
How do you kind of address concerns around reliability of your platform itself? I mean, you're still kind of an early stage company, seed stage, right? I mean, these are all, you're orchestrating multiple models, really hitting the
Yeah.
final business use case, right? So it's a
Yep.
very fairly critical, mission critical kind of layer of their infrastructure.
Yeah. I think we do as much as we can on our end. Like we test every GPU, every model enough. We have our own internal load testing pipelines for each API. We call it bench press. We kind of go ahead and run benchmarks on how much can the model push, how much can the GPU push before it crashes. And we do as much as we can. But again, if things fail, at that point, we just need to make sure that you have a good enough relationship and they trust you. I think it's the same thing. Microsoft or AWS might have this most stable infrastructure. They don't have the best performances, most optimized infrastructure, and they'll not give you the kind of support and help, and they'll not work with you like they are your own team. I think those things outweigh the fact that an incumbent might have tested something over millions of hours of GPU compute, and we have only tested it for thousands of hours of GPU compute. So I think it's the chicken and egg problem with the startup. There has to be somebody who has to adopt it. They might have early feedback. Just give them some benefit on support, give them benefits on prices, give them early access to things, um, because they help you build it out for the next stage of customers that you want to go after.
And on kind of pricing, what is the ground reality you're seeing on those AI first pricing models like usage, consumption, and there's the transition, right, from the initial kind of SaaS era pricing models. What is real and what is still kind of stuck in the old times?
I still think the best companies are pricing it like SaaS. They're not pricing it purely on usage. I think that usage-based thing was something that people spoke about when it comes to the earliest stages of AI companies. Legora is a great example. They are just saying that you would pay a team of lawyers to do all of this X millions of dollars. Pay me 1/10 of that. Um, so I think more and more people are realizing that it's some things are fundamental to pricing and you can't suddenly change them. Or some things are just fundamental. Like it's people hate AWS consoles because of the hidden costs. So as a CFO, would you want to approve 20 other applications that are coming with a similar model? You wouldn't. So there has to be some sanity coming in. So I think that's what we are also seeing, that more and more companies are actually now moving away from saying that it's only usage. There is a subscription base on top. There are credit lines on top. So they're like, pay me $15,000. I'll give you a credit line of 3,000 API calls or like 3,000. And then let's say a document parsing company that does PDF to Markdown. They'll be like, pay me $2,000, I'll give you 200 200 document parsing API calls per day. Behind that, they might have two models, three models. Their cost structures might be very different, but it's at least a sanity that as a business, I know I'm processing 200 documents a month. I just need to pay them 2,000. My CFO will approve it. Rather than saying that these people are charging me 20 cents, 50 cents per API parsing, and then I am doing 200 parsings this month, 500 parsings next month, it's fluctuating day in, day out. It's a CFO nightmare where they're sitting and looking at it with like 20 such tools coming in with proposals. I think there will be some sanity. There are some things in place because it works. It's not about disrupting all the existing workflows. People need to take their time to adapt to it. So I think that usage based is not going to be the core value prop because there's also no margin. If you're then just making barely razor thin margins on top of an API that you're calling.
So sounds like it's more outcomes and
I
tying
mean,
it
we,
back to
we charge
business
like that.
outcomes.
We charge like that. We're like,
Yeah.
we want this API with this SLA. They don't care about what's the hardware, what's the underlying stack, inference framework, optimizations. They're like, just give me an API that works for this scale. And then we are like, how much do you spend on OpenAI to do all of this? We'll charge you a comparable amount or slightly lower amount, and then it will scale like this. So every time you scale up, it will cost you like this. And it's much more easier than saying that I will charge you 50 cents per million token, 20 cents per million token. You route 30% of your request today, 50% of the request to me tomorrow. They don't want all of that. It's just give me an API that works and I know how much I'm spending on.
Yeah. And then I think at this stage of the company, right, it seems that you have kind of hit on a good problem statement. There's a wedge. You're iterating with kind of early customers, I'm assuming. Um, what are some of the things you're doing on the go-to-market side to get in front of new leads, new customers, and how is in particular that changing given the environment we are in right now, especially I mean you being a YC company and kind of being in the valley, right? Like it
Yeah.
seems like GTM is really changing
Yeah.
for AI companies, right? And of course you are in the infra layer, and so it's slightly different. You're talking to, I'm guessing, a different kind of ICPs as well. But talk to us about your thinking right now on GTM.
I mean, it's ever evolving, but I can tell you what doesn't work for us, at least based on what we've seen. A drip campaign does not work for us at the moment. I think the amount of AI SDR spam that's happening on people's inboxes is just not something that I ideally want to look at. And I have enough filters on my email to just like move the crap into trash as soon as possible. I think what's working for us are on two, three fronts. One is, of course, networks. I have a network. Our founding team members have a network. VCs have a network. People I know in the Bay, they have a network. That's one. The second is I think offline events are back, and they're back like anything in the Bay Area. So you just go and just meet people. Somebody that you're chasing with like 3 rounds of cold messages over 2 months, you might just bump into them at an event and they'll be like, I didn't even know you mailed me. Because they also probably have the same filters that I have to just not get an email. So that's the second layer. And I think the third layer is just doubling down on content and having a very sharp content wedge that you want to go after. That's what we are working on now actively, which is figuring out what are three, four pillars on which our story stands as a company and just doubling down on that with posts, blogs, articles, newsletters, and we are just doubling down on that. It'll start from next month onwards. So that's something that we are doubling down on, largely because content still works. People are in the mode of learning more. They want to hear more, but they don't want to hear the most hyped up thing of these are 10 AI tools you should use. These are best vibe coding platforms. Lovable is hitting 100 million ARR and just people reposting that in different forms. That's not what they want to listen to. They want to listen to, for example, why does Pipecat on my voice application crash when in production? That's what they want to, at least our customers want to look at. So that's how I would place it.
Yeah, I was listening to this the recent episode that Shane Parrish just released with Lulu Maservi. She's one of the kind of top PR experts, right? And she mentioned something very interesting. She said we are living in an era where, because now everyone knows these things, right? Like everyone
Yeah.
is freaking churning out LinkedIn posts and content and blogs and all that. I think the
Yeah.
key is now being very, very sharp
Yeah.
with your story, with your messaging,
Yeah.
and the precursor or the foundational element of all of that is actually understanding your audience really well.
Yep. 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 And that's the reason I said like having like these three, four pillars on what our story stands. And I think that only comes from speaking to more and more customers and understanding if you say this first thing, do they ask you about the second thing? If say the second thing, do they ask you about the third thing? Or like if you see any of these, do they lead to where you want them to go to? So I think that's what we are doubling down on, which is just having a really sharp three, four things that we talk about, not any random thing in AI, and just doubling down on it with really quality content and non-GPT generated content that's not even proofread or run by an editor. Like I still like typing. Of course, there is some amount of GPT on some of the internal things that we write as memos internally for our team, documentations that we write. But then there's always somebody reading it, fixing it, typing the first draft, and just asking you to rephrase it. Maybe it should help you. It should not write for you. That's how we look at it. People smell through it. They've read enough GPT content to smell through uh, whether it's written by GPT or not.
Yeah, yeah, as a writer, I mean, I kind of think that a good role for LLMs is actually the role of what an editor would do, right? So, in a classic kind of pre-AI world as well, right? Like somebody would still need to have an idea, do research on it, have a point of view on it, gather information, insights, and write something, and then the editor would edit it, which is
Yeah.
okay, let's make something crisper, let's make something punchier, let's make something which is too complex to understand, let's wordsmith it, right? Which is, I think, a great use of technology, right? But the ideation still has to come from a human mind. Just double clicking on the event side, right? Because this is another question that which I'm sure you are still facing, and seed stage founders face a lot, right? Which is kind of the ROI on all the effort, where it takes effort to go out.
Yeah.
How do you maintain that discipline? How do you make sure that you are actually getting kind of enough bang for the buck in terms of like the time you're committing, especially as a founder?
I think one is, from my case, I've probably burnt my hand and realized that fire is bad. So I've kind of gone to bad events and realized that they are bad events and it's just not. Um, I think it's really easy. I think most founders figure it out eventually. A few good cues would be, is it invite only? If it's not invite only, do they have some amount of credibility or historic credibility? But it's not just about hype and see, whenever an event has like 100, 200 people, I feel like it's not valuable for me, I believe, because unless there's someone specific that you want to meet, or you have a speaker slot where you can just go and speak.
Yeah, like a
Uh,
celebrity speaker or a founder who's hard to find that
yeah,
you would
exactly.
not
That
you would
that's
not be
that's
able to
different.
listen to. Yeah,
That's different.
yeah.
But if it's just a random event, like a mixer of 100 people, just wine and dine, or like just pizzas and beer, I don't think so. You should go there. As a founder, uh, because it's just at the end of the day something that gives you a perception of being busy. This is how I look at it. I think what I'd rather double down on is other invite only events. Other events that I can have a speaker slot at in any manner, because that allows you to at least get 5 minutes of attention, and then you know if there's any value. Otherwise, you leave the event after that really quick. Then are there things that you can have, other curated events that are organized by people that you might want to interact with? Maybe a potential customer is doing an event where they're inviting you, go ahead, because that's the relationship building problem point for if you're fundraising. Then if a VC is doing an event and you want to meet them, I think that's the easiest way to meet them without creating a formal structure where you're just talking about your business. So I think that's how I filter it out. I don't go into any random mixer, any random Luma event, especially if the event is not on my calendar at least a week before the event. I tend to be, maybe I'm missing out on some opportunities. One or two times I might even go. Like today, somebody called up and you go to the event tomorrow. But ideally, I tend to stay away from events that are not on my calendar for a week. Then I know that I've not spent enough time thinking about it. Because I think when things were not going as well, or we were not as busy, or like probably there are rough times in a startup. You're just not, things are not working out. just to feel good and feel busy, I was going to many events. And I was like, that's probably the worst thing I could have done when I should have spent that time fixing things in the company. And yeah, be honest to yourself. You'll know exactly what works, what doesn't work, which event you should go to, which you should not go to.
Coming to fundraising, right? And I mean, you were in the privileged position of fundraising as a YC founder, but I still want to frame the question differently, right? So as you kind of raised your seed round and are, you of course met many investors now in the Bay Area, right? What is that one thing which you feel a lot of AI founders who are now looking to fundraise might be unaware of, or it might be counterintuitive for them?
That investors today are kind of ignoring a lot of the traditional playbooks. Of course, valuations are slightly inflated. Like there's no doubt to that. But having said that, I think a couple of things that I believe in is still raising a seed round at 60, $70 million, $80 million with barely any traction kind of is shooting yourself in the foot because you have to live up to it. At some point, it will come back to bite you. That market is not always going to be this gung-ho, and they will have some problem at some point. Unless you, there are exceptions where you can just probably hit 5 million, 10 million ARR. We are seeing that with AI, and then all of that is justified. Second thing, I think having spent enough time building is that I've realized is VCs, I think, at least in the Bay Area, uh, I have controversial opinions about Indian VCs, but coming to the Bay Area, I definitely believe VCs are way sharper. They are way sharper. They understand your product industry through and through. So don't hand wave. If there's something you have spoken about, go deeper. Don't give an Apple-like presentation. Don't give a WWDC. Don't give a WWDC presentation at the end of the day. Don't hand wave. Talk about the core problems that you're solving for. They actually probably understand. There are VCs that have been engineers, staff engineers, ML engineers, and they understand tech. And I think the third piece that I believe is they're actually thinking a lot about core differentiation. Just yesterday, I was with one of my angels who also is a VC, and he was talking about how most voice infra companies are not actually voice infra companies. When I was talking to him about our real-time infrastructure that we are building, he's like, that's actually infrastructure. And he's like, I have not seen this with voice infra companies because everybody is just routing APIs to the lowest latency API provider, which does not actually solve for anything for the company exponentially. Because our pitches will bring everything together on the same cluster. End-to-end latencies will go down. You'll be able to scale across P99 latencies as per your SLAs across regions. That's an exponential problem statement you go after. But he's like, people are not thinking big enough. People are not thinking deeper on how can they go beyond what's already established. Like a VAPI has established that they can route you to the best API for latency. Why do you need to have five more companies that are doing the same thing? Why can't you just go beyond it and be like, I'll actually help you scrap all of that and bring down your latencies end to end? Um, so I think they are also kind of frustrated by seeing same kind of companies and models coming out, and they're like, one thing that works, you have like 10 more people. Of course, the next two, three people also raise because there's a trickle down effect. But then the other people also get stuck there. They're not pushing it to the next layer of efficiency or the next layer of a great company in India is Thesis. They are doing this thing called generative UI. I'm like, why have more people not thought about it? Why is everybody going across a chat-based interface trying to render charts the way you traditionally were rendering charts or giving responses like a chat GPT? These people have just flipped the pitch and they are building their own form of responses that a LLM can give. I think that's really innovative, and that's what the value is for AI. Like, try new things, try interesting things. I think VCs also want to probably look at that.
Yeah, totally agreed. I mean, I posted exactly this thought yesterday on LinkedIn, right? Which is the whole point of AI and leveraging AI as a platform shift is you have to reimagine things from first principles. I mean, that's the whole point. It's instead of trying to agentify every SaaS era use case, think about new things. I mean, that's the true unlock of this tech. But final question, and this is more focusing on kind of US India cross border founders, right? What is that one hard-earned lesson that you would like to share with them? Especially, I think I would say over the last couple of years, right, of kind of moving here, doing YC, and now kind of scaling and building the company here.
It's way harder for a cross-border founder to build a company in the Bay Area than anyone else. It's not related to any perception or any prejudice or anything. It's just that you have to deal with compliances, teams, time zones that others don't. Uh, and of course, visas and all of those things. It's just too much of your emotional and mental bandwidth goes towards handling things that you don't need to if you would have been already in the Bay Area, staying here and building out of it. And very honestly, if you do not need to, don't have an Indian subsidiary. It's gonna, it sucks your time like anything else. Those compliances and everything, middle of the night, it affects your work at the end of the day heavily. And it's unnecessarily complicated. So if you're looking to build in the Bay Area, just try to build in the Bay Area or have as less of overheads as possible in India, and also try to assimilate. I think that's one big problem. Again, nothing against it, but I've seen a lot of India US cross-border founders only being in events where there are India US cross-border people. And I'm like, that's not what you're here for. Like, you can meet them in Bangalore when you were in Bangalore. Why are you meeting the same people coming when you're coming here? Uh, I think these are the I mean, on the compliance side a little bit, but I think the fundamental is just try to leverage the Bay Area more. Don't just be around people from the same ecosystem because you're comfortable with it, because that's not going to get you the exponential growth, because all your customers are not in the same pool. They're also here to grow. But you have existing customers that are outside of the pool that you're already talking to.
Yeah, no, very well said. And I think both these points have been mentioned by many, many other guests on my podcasts before. So, yeah, just underlying those points. But no, thank you so much, Arko. This has been a great conversation. I think this whole space is moving so fast. Of course, you are building at the edge of it. So I think it is important for founders, even though I know all the companies are very early stage and things will change and keep changing. But I think these learnings are, I think, going to be gold for people just, couple of years behind you.
Thank you so much. I hope it's helpful for at least one person, so they don't do a bunch of mistakes that I have made.